Okay, can I request you to just maybe pay attention to our next phase in the program, which is very, very exciting. So it's an honor this morning to welcome Sergio Ermotti in conversation with Tatiana Fullick. I will introduce Sergio in a minute, but I wanted to offer a special welcome to Tatiana because she's one of our graduates from 10 years ago. Tatiana, welcome. She is now an executive director at UBS, and she'll be leading the conversation with Sergio. Now, Sergio is a member of the Global Executive Board and CEO from 2011 to 2020, and since April 2023, Group CEO of USB Group. Sergio is one of the leading figures in the world of finance globally, and he started his banking career in a small bank in Lugano, Switzerland. Sergio spent his earlier career at Merrill Lynch and also with UniCredit, where he served as Group Deputy Chief Executive Officer. Sergio is on the boards of several different organizations, and most important of all, he's also one of us. Sergio is a graduate of the Advanced Management Program at Oxford Side and is also a member of the Side Business School's Global Leadership Council. Sergio, we're very delighted and honored that you made the time to join us today. Our students are looking forward to the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, the microphone works. It's very exciting to be here with you today. Do you know that UBS is the biggest wealth manager in the world? It's 2.6 trillion assets under management, and you have CEO of the whole group here with you today. Sergio, how does it feel for you to be back?
Well, pretty good. So first of all, I've been here in 2001 for my advanced management program, and it's great to be among young people. Get out of my day-to-day routine. So welcome to all of you to Oxford. I understand it's a big day for you. You are starting a new chapter of your life, so it's quite exciting. I think that for me back then, was only a month, but quite interesting one also to get some new perspectives on the world. And I was already very busy with an executive job, and being able to detach from a very specialized day-to-day job into a broader set of teams, getting to know people from different countries and different industries was very important. So it's great to be back.
Thank you. And to what extent do you apply the knowledge that you learned through your program at your current job? Basically what Oxford has given to you.
Well, to be honest, learning and, you start to learn, in school you go through a curriculum, but you will eventually realize that is a concept that evolves. It's very difficult to point out exactly I learned it at school, here or anywhere else. So it's the accumulation of your experiences that, makes you realize at a point in time during any decision-making process or any situations, you realize that you take out the expertise that is necessary to address an issue. So it's difficult to point out what you learn here. What you learn here is the basis, and the real learning is going to be outside when you work, when you go through your own experiences, when you have to translate the theory into practice. So it's very important then always to recalibrate how you implement what you learn rather than the notion in itself.
What about Oxford Network? Oxford is known for an amazing network, and you will all be meeting amazing people in high concentration here. And so people come here to find business partners, to find clients, to find deals. What about you? Have you?
I kept some good relationships over the years. I think, of course, time goes by and it's not always easy to. The good news is that when you get here, you get an international, global, network of people, and the bad news is that all those people then go back into their, and therefore it's also not always easy to stay connected. But eventually, I think that, if I can say, probably nowadays it's much easier to stay in touch. I mean, I don't need to explain you the power of social media and communication. So I think that's quite a big change. In 2000, you have to remember when I was here in 2000, the concept of internet was starting to ramp up. So those were the early days where, it was a lot of hype in our industry, in financial markets around the internet. So now it's almost unthinkable. So I think I'm sure that if we would have had the social media of today back then, I would probably have even broader relationships than I have today.
I'm going to ask you one question that I'm being asked by every cohort of MBAs. So I try to answer them every year, but now I'm going to address it to you from day one. Lots of people come to the business school to switch into finance and banking. Many people would do that. And so the question that I'm being quite often asked is, what do you do to be successful in competing with people who've been in the industry for 10 years, right? So if like generally people here 27, 30 years old, people who already work for a bank, been 10 years in banking. And so what you need to do after graduation, right, is to get into finance and be competitive.
Well, of course, you need to be competitive, but you need to go back to one point. So business and first of all, on day one, don't pretend to close the gap of 10 years of experience. Of course, that's the bad news, right? The good news is that, at your age, late 20, early 30s, so whatever you are, the catch up between the talented people and the less talented people is going to be it's not 10 years. In 5 to 6 years, you can basically close that gap, or even less. So that's the reality. But essentially, it's not about competing per se. So, I mean, if you want to really compete, do sports, right? So, of course, you have to be competitive to be successful, but you have to do it in a healthy way. And also in a realistic way. So first of all, of course, you need to have the skill set necessary to succeed. You need to have passion. So if you do things only to just have a career or getting paid or getting a position that would attract attention, is not enough, because then perseverance is very important. Of course, you need to be you need to have some luck, but most importantly, you need to understand that you are lucky in that moment. And eventually, not very often, you will have the courage to, take a decision that is maybe driving you to go out of a comfort zone. Because really, if you really want to succeed, you need to have a broader experience, you need to be passionate about what you do, but you need also to be courageous in a smart way to understand when is the right moment to do some things different. And it's very, very important because, look, in the next 20 years, I don't need to explain you that the jobs you have in mind today probably won't even exist. So therefore, you need constantly to think about what's next. I go back to what I mentioned before. The notion of learning here is step number 5 in your career. So you're going to have to learn many other things. And so with that mentality, you can then eventually close the gap. And, you know, you have to know that not everybody can be, at the end of the day, the president of the United States or the CEO of a bank or any organization. But that shouldn't distract you from the most important issue. You need to enjoy what you do. If you want to be successful, enjoy what you do. And if you enjoy what you do, the likelihood that you're going to be successful is much higher. Much higher. So, because there is nothing more miserable than working and not doing what you like to do. So choose really what you like to do. Don't be afraid of changes and basically even drop after a year or two. You know, you say, okay, it's not my job. Let's move on. You're young enough. You're going to live much longer than previous generations, so you have plenty of time to do the right thing.
Thank you. That's a great advice, I think. If you don't mind, we'll go to a very hot topic at the moment, is UBS and Credit Suisse merger. And for everybody's understanding, after graduating from the business school, I joined Credit Suisse.
It's hot for you.
Exactly.
I understand.
So I joined Credit Suisse for 8 years, and then these guys bought us. Yeah. So you have been asked to return to UBS for the second time around once the merger has been decided. And so for this second round, what has changed for you as a leader? Maybe there are some new things that you have learned. Were you scared when they offered you to lead the merger, because it's two big Swiss banks, right? And they are not the same. Well,
look, first of all, I was definitely humbled and honored that they asked me to come back and you know, basically manage the integration of two significant global significant financial institutions like UBS and Credit Suisse. It's the first time it had never happened, so I think that was very it was very humbled. And like every time I got a promotion, of course you have to be a little bit scared, right? So you can't really, I mean, anybody that gets something like that and feels okay, you know, the likelihood that you're going to fail is pretty high, because that would indicate a level of complacency. So, and it's definitely an advice that's, you know, never really think that a promotion is overdue or is easy. I'm going to do it easy. You know, always try to be focused. So I took it very, very focused. I knew that it was a completely different job I had to do. You know, first time around was restructuring UBS, setting a new direction in terms of business model that was eventually very successful. So successful that we were asked to rescue our largest competitor. So, so in a sense, the second one is more about integrating the business model, de-risking, changing, integrating to different set of people, potentially cultures, but at the end of the day, I don't think is such a difference between the two banks. But eventually, at the beginning, it was something that. So it's a different manner. It's much more attention on us, on me, than before. So it's a completely different dynamics. But of course, you know, having the confidence, healthy one, to have done a good job with my team in the first time around, we got at least a very good start into you know, the integration. So it's a different experience, and the one that is gonna definitely be part of history in terms of our industry. So hopefully it's gonna be a good chapter. So I'm working with the team very hard on that. So, and we are making good progress, but we are not complacent. Still a lot of work to be done.
And of course, this integration means a lot of changes for the employees, not only us, but also the ones who've been originally at UBS. And I mean, from the very beginning for us, we had a panic attack, right? Basically, for the first for the first 6 months. How do you take your employees to this journey? How do you make sure that they are on board? What's your leadership style? Because there are a lot of challenges on the operational side, but also, again, on the product side, on everything, right?
Well, first, it was very important to make sure that the new colleagues understood, our strategy and how complementary, because Credit Suisse really had very good talents, very good services, very good clients base, very complementary area of businesses that would enhance and accelerate the equity story of UBS. So making sure that people understood that despite the very unfortunate way, it happened, that good talents and people that were willing to reset could flourish within UBS and make UBS stronger. So that they had a very important role to play if they wanted to do it. So, we took a couple of fairly simple decisions. For example, within 6 months, all employees of the bank were not subject to the same kind of methodology in terms of valuations for performance, for promotions, for compensations, so which was at a record time. It's very important to make everybody feel treated in the same way. I hope you agree.
Yes, I agree. I agree because I got promoted to executive director. I agree because I got promoted to executive director at UBS this year, yeah.
That's the reason we picked you up for this interview, right?
Exactly.
It's a joke. It's a joke, I had no clue. No, and the second, I mean, it was very important to do that. And then also we made a real issue that despite being a takeover, that if you look at the second and third line of in the organization and going down, we have between 20 and 30% of the key positions being occupied by former Credit Suisse people. So you would say, well, why it's not 50? That's not realistic because the processes we had to implement to integrate very fast were the UBS processes. The business model is the UBS business model, so it would not be practical to expect any other outcome. So believe me, 20-30% outcome is a pretty good one. Yeah. And so by doing that, we eventually created a sense of belonging to the Credit Suisse people in UBS, but also on the other side, you can imagine for the UBS people was not so easy because on the other side, people say, wait a second, we took them over. Why should we now lose our responsibilities or even lose my job for doing that? So the integration in that sense has been successful, but still, it takes time. It was very important for us to go through the legal entity mergers of UBS and Credit Suisse so that people within the organization would stop talking about UBS versus Credit Suisse. Right now, the language is more, red line, blue line, because the red is UBS and blue is Credit Suisse. But you can see how psychologically we also try to, over time, make people feel being part of the same organizations. And so it's the most important element to be successful because at the end of the day, how people feel is going to be reflected in how clients see us. So if our people are committed and convinced, the clients will feel it. And if clients feel it, you got two of the three most important stakeholders on board. The third one being shareholders. So if you get shareholders, employee, and clients aligned in thinking that the organization functions in the right way, most likely you're going to please a lot of other stakeholders, right? External one. They are also very important, but believe me, if you get these three right, you have a pretty powerful combination.
I think our clients were happy from day one when the merger was announced. Do you think that this downfall of Credit Suisse, let's call it like this, will impact the financial industry in the future?
Yeah, because it was the first time after the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, that the new regulatory framework around banks, global systemic banks, was asked to be, was put under scrutiny. And eventually, the Swiss government and the authorities decided to go for a merger or an acquisition by UBS rather than a resolution of Credit Suisse. But eventually, what we are demonstrating right now is that many of the decisions taken into post the financial crisis in making the regulatory framework around banking stronger have played out well. So what we are doing right now is the resolution of Credit Suisse, the integration of Credit Suisse businesses into UBS, but de facto is the proof that a bank of this size can fail without the taxpayer having to pay for it. Because, basically, of course, the government had to put some liquidity help to bridge the transition, but the liquidity was paid back. So banks rarely go down because of capital. It's mainly because of liquidity. So once the liquidity was put in place, we could stabilize the business. And so your question is that I do expect that this experience will put under further scrutiny the liquidity requirements of banks, particularly considering the new dynamics that we are facing in our economy, in our digital world. It takes a nanosecond for clients to transfer money out of an account to another bank. In the past, the run of the bank, maybe you saw it when you were going through history, people would have to queue out of the bank or send a letter or call the bank in order to transfer money out, close the account. Right now, clients can do it within seconds digitally. So it means that all the models that are there to basically manage the liquidity of the bank, have to be rethinked. And that was very clear during the regional bank crisis in the US and eventually also for Credit Suisse.
Do you think it will lead to consolidation of more European banks?
Well, that's not because of this, because I don't think that this is necessarily the reason why you may see more consolidation in Europe in banks. European banks are, too small to compete on a global scale. I mean, we and maybe another one are, a couple of other banks are the exceptions. But if you look at the landscape in Europe, it's totally fragmented. Eventually, I do think that in order to succeed, banks, but also Europe itself, in order to succeed, needs to have a stronger financial system. You need to have a clear regulatory framework and that allows that to happen. So you need a banking union framework. You need a capital market framework so that Europe can really compete with the US and Asia, and particularly with China in respect of mobilizing all the financial resources necessary to go through the transformation of the economy, the major investments needed to change also our economies in terms of sustainability. We talk about the change challenges. To mobilize all this means you need to have a stronger financial system and stronger banks. Doing what Europe has been doing post the financial crisis won't help and has translated into a very uncompetitive positions of European banks.
And what do you think about banking competing with different payment systems? Will it change the future of banks like ours?
No, look, of course, in the last 10 years or so, the non-banking financial institutions have been gaining a lot of weight in our system. So if you take out asset managers and insurance company from that definition, when you look at sponsors or private equity or specialized funds doing equities or credit or any kind of new hybrid form of disintermediation of the traditional banking industry, they have created a lot of value, but they also created some hidden risks that are not yet fully understood.
Yeah.
So I do expect that this trend is likely to continue until you have a problem emerging. Usually you see politicians and regulators react after the event. Very rarely they can stop some things like what's going on right now happening. I'm not saying that is all wrong, but there are definitely some areas where you would wonder what is the benefit of taking out this kind of activity from a regulated, transparent banking system and allowing them to go into a non-regulated system. So there is a risk that if this goes on, continues to go on, of course, banks will lose out in certain areas, but on the other hand, banks will continue to be a vital, will continue to play a vital role in the economies. The ability to embrace technology, artificial intelligence will allow us to become more efficient and effective in the way we manage clients' businesses, we manage cost, we manage, and create value in different ways, like we did in the last, 100 years. If I go back into my early days in banking, I used to buy and sell currencies through a telex machine. Okay. So, and I remember how excited I was when I saw my first fax machine. Believe me, yeah. So you see how still those banks have changed. Some of them disappeared. Some of them are stronger than before. It all means that, it's a change and it's an evolution, and the stronger will survive and find ways to do things in a way that is value added to clients and shareholders.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one last question, and then we have time for questions from the audience. There are microphones around. So we talked a little bit about it at the beginning, but if you are to give one piece of advice to the current student about their careers, what would that be? Because they all come from different backgrounds, from different countries, but they all want to change something, right? Because they came here to change their life. And you will change your life for better.
I guess I already answered that question. Of course, you have been doing what you had to do so far. Today, you are starting a new chapter of that journey. So, improve your skill set. I have to say, it's great you do it by taking a year off or so from your current curriculum, your career. So I go back into the courageous decision. In many cases, you wanted to do some things different. In some cases, maybe you had already a pretty good job and you decided, okay, but let me do some things different. I don't know. But, working on your skills, lifelong is very important. Don't ever expect that this is going to be the end. You're going to have to invest a lot of time, and don't expect your employer, or even worse, the government, to do it for you. You have to do it. So if you go back into being competitive, that's the kind of competition is around yourself, being in control of your destiny. So skills, the passion I mentioned before, do what you like to do, be passionate and things are going to come. Of course, you need to work hard. The perseverance I mentioned before is very important, because you look at my CV, you think it's a great straight line. It was not a straight line, I can assure you. I went through ups and downs. And you need to be very determined in what you want to achieve. That's probably also a kind of competitive spirit that you have to have with yourself, right? And by the way, when you compete, try to avoid to over-compete with your colleagues. There is plenty of competition outside your organizations, okay? Don't compete internally, because that never really translate into, a positive outcome. And yeah, of course you need to be lucky, but you need to be also aware where you're lucky and be modest to recognize that you have been lucky, and everybody will have, its own turn of luck. You just need to realize and be courageous. So it's very simple for me.
Thank you so much. Now we have questions from the audience. Oh, wow. Okay. Let's start with...
Thank you, Sergio and Tatiana, for being here with us today. My name is Margarita, and speaking of ups and downs, I was wondering if you're comfortable, Sergio, of sharing the biggest career challenge or a big career challenge that you've experienced, and how did you overcome it?
Well, the biggest was probably, I had many, so it's difficult to go through, but the one that was most defining was the one when I felt was the early 90s. I went through a pretty bad year in terms of my business unit was having a very bad performance. I was definitely responsible for part of it, not entirely responsible for it, but because other people were supposed to co-share responsibilities with me, but that's not the point. I found myself into a situation in which it was clear that life could have been better for me to leave the organizations I was in, and conveniently for me, or even for some of the people around me that would have a scapegoat. And that was very defining moment for me, because I really took on the challenge to demonstrate that I would want to leave on my term if I left. Eventually, at that point in time, I would say that very few people would have bet any big dollars that I would then, within 2 years, I would be promoted to a much bigger job. So that was, in a sense, the worst moment, but at the same time was a decisive moment in which, was maybe the courage to, not to let other people de facto decide for my fate.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergio. In one of your previous interviews, you mentioned that it takes 20 years to build a successful leader for an organization. So my question is, if we look at this long marathon, so how would you just to keep yourself challenged in your daily job and keep the learning curve? And at the same time, when do you decide is the right moment to jump the horse? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's that journey is a journey that you know is a big selection process. So, I mean, you go through. It's based on results, on quality of how people behave under stress. I mean, the issue in the promotion journey, it's all about skill set, but it's also about the personality to lead people by example, by really making sure that you also understand the personalities of the peoples and how they embrace you know, stress, how they can work together, how can they eventually become fungible in doing different jobs. And so it's a long process, but you know, it's very important that to understand that in order to take top leadership positions nowadays, you need to be more than a specialist. It's very rare that you can be a successful manager at the top of a larger organization if you have done only one thing in life. It may happen. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's very, very hard. So the selection process is very hard. And by the way, it also means from time to time in large organizations to allow people to grow within the organization, but not being afraid to take people from the outside and create also, so, you know, brings different skill set and different personalities as part of the team.
Can I ask, yeah, both if you want.
Thank you. My name is Ivan. My question is more about banking. You mentioned that Credit Suisse takeover was largely possible thanks to that liquidity provided, and it depended on government action to an extent. But if we look at the rest of Europe, European banking union is still incomplete. ERB depends on single resolution mechanism, and the board depends on resolution fund and ESM. With that in mind, does it still stand that in good times, banks are international, in bad times, banks are national?
It's a very good point. I mean, that's really, that's the reason why it's not possible for Europe to expect or pretend to be a single market without having a banking union and still differentiating so much between one country and the other. So I think that's it's an incoherence that is fairly important, and in my point of view has been damaging Europe in the last 20 years or so. You know, so much that you see the gap between the growth in the US, Asia in general, and the one of Europe in terms of GDP. It's also reflected through that. It's fair to say that banks have a national bias, but you know, when you become global like we are, you know that you can't really afford to go too far in that, because you know, if a subsidiary or a business unit that you manage globally fails or is under stress and you don't really help it, the consequences for the entire group are quite severe. So the notion that you can be very focused and only nationalistic during a crisis without creating a problem also for your own, in your own market, it's not a concept that will work.
You wanted to ask something?
Hello, thanks both for being here today. So I'm sure there are many people in this room who are very passionate about the financial services industry, may have worked in it for a number of years. There are also, I think, many of us who are very interested in sustainability and kind of pursuing the combination of those two things here at Oxford. You mentioned sustainability at UBS. So where do you see there being opportunities in sustainability within the financial services industry, and how can we help you to succeed in bringing those two together?
Look, I'm a firm believer that the bank and the financial system should plays a very important role in helping the transition. It's very important that it's there to help to find solutions to mobilize capitals, and from savings into investments and in different forms. So being private clients investing their assets in a way that fulfill their targets in terms of what they mean by sustainability, which, by the way, as you know, is very subjective, and not only by individual, but also by countries, and also bridging what is, governments wants to achieve. But I'm very convinced that the financial system should not be the policeman or the one dictating how things should be done. So, governments have to take the lead on how they want to achieve these transitions, and we can help. So we play a very important role to design products, to mobilize capital, to use the banking system as a leveraging factor. For example, when you talk about philanthropy, but also, sustainability project around climate, we need to do better in using the power of leverage of the system, because, governments and in general don't have a lot of opportunities, or I call it financial power to really mobilize all the money necessary to address the issues. But if you agree that, for example, government money should be taking care of the first loss, the most important one in terms of capital stack, you would be able to mobilize trillions of money potentially, because different investors have different risk appetite, in fulfilling those ambitions. And therefore, what we can do is design those products, find investors that are willing to co-share risk with governments, or take a more senior chunk of the exposure, but still, instead of deploying 10 billions for a solar facility, because you only have 10 billions, maybe you can generate 100 billions, because then you get, the capital that comes in at a different return, but with a lower risk. So that's the role we can play. We can also do a lot of things in mobilizing money around philanthropy. With the same techniques, we already do that. I mean, we have been doing a lot of work around this topic early on in the days where it was not very fashionable to talk about ESG, right? So that's the reason we are a leader in the industry, because what we want to do is help our clients. And by the way, it's not just the young generations like you that care about their legacy to the world. I know a lot of wealthy clients, that are not the youngest any longer, and they do care, and they want to find ways to create sustainable way of doing things. And what we mean by sustainability there is not just what we understand. They want to make sure that the money is well deployed, and deployed in a way that outcome can be measured. Because I don't think that we can really achieve what is necessary if we don't mobilize capital around clear KPIs and trackable. And by the way, also clear that we cannot pretend to have one size fits all approach. We cannot pretend that every country, every region in the world has to do the same things at the same time. Because this is not how wealth and how is distributed globally. This is not how certain economies perform in the current environment. So we need to be flexible in doing that. That's the reason when we look at sustainability, for example, around climate, as a bank, I'm very happy when I have the two opposites not being happy with us, because I know we do something right. Because when it's so polarized, the entire team is so polarized that I really think that we should stay in the middle in helping finding practicable solutions to resolve the issue.
I think we have time for one or two more questions. We'll go at the back. The lady at the back. Yeah.
Hello, both. Yeah. So firstly, I just wanted to introduce myself as I'm Samina, and I did work with UBS, so I started my career at UBS from my engineering as well. Like I was an intern, and then I joined UBS, and I've been working with UBS for the past 3 years. So firstly, I would like to thank the whole UBS team, because I think it has always encouraged people to pursue their dreams, and I think that's where I am here today. So my question to you would be, what would be some of the skill sets or career opportunities that we as students can expect at UBS post our MBAs?
You didn't get the last point of the question. You didn't get the last part of the question.
Could you please repeat the last part of the question?
The last part of the question. What you can expect? Was funny. I understand it was funny, but I haven't got it.
So I asked, what are some of the career opportunities that we as MBAs can expect post our university?
Please log into ubs.com. Look, it's plenty of opportunities. So I guess it really, I go back. I mean, if you look what we do across the board, from technology, to business, wealth management, investment bank, asset management, is plenty of jobs and openings every day. Of course, it's very competitive. If I remember correctly, for around 3,000 to 4,000 trainees job that we get in the organization, we get 100,000 applications. So it's very tough and selective. And by the way, I fully understand it's not a perfect selection process, to be fair, because at the end of the day, you understand the magnitude of the CVs that we get and applications by default is very difficult to, but we try to do our best. But, as I mentioned before, what I think is very important to us, and I'm trying to drive this into the organization, is the concept of internal mobility. So the most important issue is not what you can do when you go back, but are we going to give you enough opportunities during your career to see other things within UBS without you having to go out? And that's, for me, is the most important part, because only through that we can develop the leaders that are broader. Only through that we can also promote collaborations between businesses and units in the bank. So it's very important that we, collaboration and working together is very important, because in the eyes of clients, we are one UBS. But the truth of the matter is that we have different business units in different regions, each of them with their own targets and things to do. But eventually, in many cases, the best value for the clients and for our shareholders is not coming by trying to maximize your own short-term objective. So to do that, collaboration and knowing people within the organizations and how other people work is very important. That's the reason we are also keen to promote, mobility within the organization.
Do we have time for one more question? Yeah, one more. Yeah.
Sergio, hi Tatiana. Yeah, thank you for being here with us today. My question is a follow-up to what Sergio said about tough times in the early 90s. I understand that you said you had the most challenging period of your career. So my question is that what was it that inspired you to just keep going and weather that storm and not just give up or change careers?
Yeah, I guess, well, maybe I go back into, maybe is that my own sense of proudness and my competitive spirit. Yeah, probably that was the real issue. So I said before. So I thought that I wanted to make sure that eventually people would see that that was an episode and was not really reflective of my past and what I believed I could still add to the organization. So it's, how can you call it? It's a sense of proudness, or how you say that. So.
Thank you. Thank you both. I hope I'm audible.
I'm Abhay from India. Talking about risk, I know that acquiring Credit Suisse when it was facing a significant increase in credit risk was a huge risk for UBS. So how do you draw the line between taking a risk or not taking a risk? And how do you prepare yourself if your decision goes wrong?
Well, first of all, I was not part over the weekend. I was doing something else. I was actually I got called back the Monday after they made that decision. So, but in a sense, I can tell you that it was possible to resolve Credit Suisse, but that would have created some potential risks for the financial system because although Credit Suisse had enough capital to be liquidated without any losses to taxpayers and clients, at that point in time, there was some doubt around financial stability following what happened in the regional banks in the US. And all the authorities agreed that, having a solution like UBS there, it would have been more prudent to do the resolution through UBS. For UBS was a matter of, of balancing the fact that by doing nothing, by not intervening, most likely UBS would have been benefiting almost overnight by a lot of clients moving on without any major effort, right? So, but on the other end, the second order effect for the country reputation and also for UBS and the financial system in general were elements that needed to be carefully put on the table. So it was a trade-off between those two forces, and the second was much more, important. So I think that in a nutshell, I would say, was the right solution that now means we have to work hard to integrate. It's, some people think that, for example, UBS bought Credit Suisse for only $3 billion. But the truth of the matter, it's going to take until the end of 2026 for UBS to restore the same level of profitability we had in 2022. So if you measure the difference between the profitability over the years, over the next 3 years, with how much we were expected to earn, you would get the true cost of the acquisition. Of course, it's going to create value over time, but it's a costly exercise. It's much more costly than people think. So all these kind of reflections we're going through over the weekend, and at the end of the day, I think we did the right thing for the country and for the financial system and also for the clients.
Thank you so much, Sergio. Thank you so much, Tatiana, for, I think, a very open and a very honest discussion. You talked about many things, Sergio, but for me, what struck me was one word: courage. And I think this is very important today in leaders. Courage to make important decisions, courage to make important trade-offs. And I think many of you will face those important decisions and trade-offs in your own careers. And I hope Sergio's words will serve as inspiration for you as you look at your future. So thank you once again very much.
Well, I forgot to say also, I wish you all the best for your life.